Beneath Egyptian sands lie 25 granite sarcophagi, each weighing as much as a fully loaded railway car. Not a single modern engineer can offer a coherent explanation for them. In Delhi, India, stands an iron column that has resisted rust for 16 centuries, while modern metal corrodes within a matter of years. In the soil of Iraq rested a battery assembled 2,000 years before Volta made his discovery. All of these artifacts burst the seams of conventional textbooks, because those textbooks were written by people who never laid eyes on the objects themselves. Today we examine 7 genuine ancient finds, each of which looks as though it was dropped here by travelers from the distant future. And we begin with the heaviest mystery, in the most literal sense of the word. All 7 artifacts can be touched with human hands. Each is kept in a real museum, and each shatters the familiar picture of the past. Egypt, Saqqara, the year 1850. French archaeologist Auguste Mariette noticed a stone sphinx protruding from the sand to the northwest of the Pyramid of Djoser. After excavating an entire avenue of such statues, he realized they led directly to the entrance of an underground structure. When his team broke through, dynamite was required, since the passages had been sealed solid. Behind the stone walls opened a labyrinth of long corridors carved into limestone. In the main gallery, arranged on either side of the passage, stood 25 enormous boxes of black and pink granite, each one 4 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, 3.25 meters tall. The lid alone weighs 30 tons, and the full mass of the container approaches 100 tons. That is the weight of a loaded railway car, tucked into a tight underground niche. When Mariette opened one of the boxes with explosives, there was absolutely nothing inside, only emptiness and mirror-polished walls. Official science calls this complex the Serapeum, and insists that sacred Apis bulls were buried here. The problem is that not a single one of the opened containers held animal remains or any trace of mummification. What they did find was something far more unsettling, an inhuman precision of stonework. Engineer Christopher Dunn, who spent 49 years in high-precision manufacturing, carefully measured the interior surfaces of 2 of the containers. He used an industrial gauge with a tolerance of 2/10,000ths of an inch. The walls proved flat to a standard achievable only on CNC machine tools. Every corner holds exactly 90 degrees, and the radius of curvature in the corners is just 4 millimeters. When Dunn approached an American firm with a request to reproduce such a container from a single piece of granite, the answer was direct. Even with an unlimited budget, the piece would have to be assembled from 6 separate slabs. Meanwhile, the ancient craftsman carved each box from a single monolith quarried at Aswan, 800 kilometers from Saqqara. The material of most containers rates 6 on the Mohs hardness scale, and some are made from diorite, an even harder stone. The tunnels are so narrow that 2 people can barely pass each other. How 100-ton monoliths were turned at right angles in those corridors and lowered into niches with a clearance of 40 centimeters, science provides no answer. There is simply no room for levers or a crew of workers, and official history has never heard of hydraulics among the ancient Egyptians. One unfinished container still stands in the middle of a tunnel to this day, as though the builders abandoned it halfway through and vanished forever. Roughly scratched hieroglyphs on the outer walls contrast sharply with the mirror finish of the inner surfaces, as though the inscriptions were added by entirely different people, thousands of years after the containers themselves were created. Now let us move from the underground galleries of Egypt to the floor of the Mediterranean Sea. In 1901, Greek sponge divers were caught in a storm near the island of Antikythera. The captain sent a diver down so as not to waste time. He surfaced in a panic, shouting about dead men 60 meters below. The captain descended himself and found not a cemetery, but the wreck of an ancient Roman vessel that had sunk around 65 BC. The dead men turned out to be marble statues that had lain in the sand for 2 millennia. Among the sculptures and scattered coins lay an unremarkable lump of green-encrusted bronze. For 2 years it gathered dust in a storage crate at the National Museum in Athens, until the politician Spiridon Stius noticed a crack on the surface. From it gleamed a gear wheel, small, perfectly cut, in an object more than 2,000 years old. Newspapers proclaimed a sensation, skeptics cried forgery. But X-ray tomography in the early 2000s settled the matter. Inside lay a mechanism of 37 bronze gears, the largest 13 centimeters in diameter with 223 teeth. A device the size of a laptop that calculated the positions of the sun, the moon, and 5 planets, predicted solar and lunar eclipses, tracked the cycles of the Olympic Games, and displayed the phases of the moon. European science did not achieve this level of computational precision until a full 1,500 years later. The mechanism accounted for the fact that the moon accelerates and decelerates at different points in its elliptical orbit. To achieve this, 2 gears were mounted with an offset axis, effectively a differential, the very component that allows the wheels of your car to rotate at different speeds around a corner. The teeth of each wheel are cut with a precision unattainable by hand filing. They are uniform, as though stamped. Inscriptions on the back panel, recently deciphered through tomography, proved to be a detailed operating manual. The missing hands of the front panel once carried colored spheres, fiery red for Mars, gold for the Sun. Researchers at University College London called the original the work of a genius who united Babylonian astronomy with the mathematics of the Platonic Academy. Whoever assembled this device understood the structure of the cosmos at a level the rest of humanity would not reach for another 20 centuries. The Roman orator Cicero, writing in the 1st century BC, described a similar device built by Archimedes in Syracuse, meaning the Antikythera Mechanism was not unique. It belonged to an entire tradition, of which only one example has survived to reach us. The Greeks had packed the sky into a bronze box, and Indian blacksmiths, at roughly the same period, mastered iron. In the courtyard of the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque in Delhi stands a column 7 meters and 20 centimeters tall, weighing more than 6 tons. A Sanskrit inscription connects it to King Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty, 4th to 5th century of the Common Era. For 16 centuries, this column has stood in the open air, through monsoon downpours and scorching heat, and it bears almost no rust. Ordinary iron in Delhi's climate becomes encrusted with corrosion within a matter of years. The Eiffel Tower is repainted every 7 years. In the 10th century, a cannonball struck the column. It held, preserving only a dent 4 meters up. Scientists from the Indian Institute of Technology analyzed the composition of the metal in 2002. The iron proved to contain an unusually high proportion of phosphorus, up to 1%. Modern steel typically holds less than 1/100th of that. In the presence of moisture, this phosphorus forms a thin film of iron hydrogen phosphate on the surface of the metal, a natural barrier that blocks oxygen and moisture from reaching the iron beneath. The protective layer is less than 1/10 of a millimeter thick. It cannot be seen with the naked eye, but it works. The ancient Indian metallurgists arrived at this formula through an empirical process that took generations. They did not know the word phosphorus. They did not know the word electrochemistry. But they created an alloy that modern engineers have only recently learned to replicate under laboratory conditions. The column was forged by hand from several hundred small pieces of iron, welded together at high temperature by forge welding. To create such a shaft without mechanized equipment requires heat, precision, and a mastery of material that borders on the inexplicable. The Romans mastered iron, and in their own time they mastered light as well. In the British Museum behind armored glass stands the Lycurgus Cup, the only fully intact example of dichroic glass from antiquity. When light falls on the cup from the front, it appears green, like jade. When light passes through the wall from within, the vessel blazes ruby red. On the surface is carved a scene from myth, King Lycurgus entangled in grapevines, with the god Dionysus watching his death. The carving is executed in the cage cup technique. The glass was cast as a thick block and then material was cut away until only a lacework shell remained. But the trick of the color change is hidden not in the carving, it lies in the very structure of the material. The answer came in the 1990s, when fragments of similar Roman glass were examined under an electron microscope. Inside were found particles of a gold-silver alloy approximately 50 nanometers in size, 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. When light touches these inclusions, the electrons of the metal begin to oscillate and shift wavelength. Silver accounts for the green color in reflection, gold for the red when light passes through. This effect is called plasmon resonance and is used today in sensors and holographic technologies. Roman craftsmen ground gold and silver to particles invisible to the naked eye and fused them into glass in a ratio of 7 to 100. Scientists at Cambridge only managed to replicate this effect in 2014 by creating arrays of 16 million nanoparticles per millimeter. The Romans achieved the same result 16 centuries ago, without microscopes, without lasers, without textbooks on optics. The secret of production died with the empire, and the Lycurgus Cup remained the sole complete witness to that lost technology. Today, researchers are attempting to apply this ancient principle to create ultra-sensitive water contamination detectors. A technology born for the banqueting table may save millions of lives, 17 centuries after its invention. The Romans commanded light. Their contemporaries in the East may have commanded electricity. In 1936, during the construction of a railway line outside Baghdad, workers opened an ancient burial site near the ruins of Ctesiphon, the capital of the Parthian Empire. Among the finds was a clay jar 14 centimeters tall with a copper cylinder inside. At the center of the cylinder, an iron rod hung suspended, not touching the walls, and the neck was hermetically sealed with a bitumen stopper. Wilhelm Koenig, director of the National Museum of Iraq, immediately recognized the design of a galvanic cell, two metals with differing electrochemical potential, separated by a space for liquid electrolyte. Traces of corrosion on the walls pointed to the presence of acid, most likely vinegar or grape juice. The American scientist Willard Gray assembled an exact replica and filled it with grape juice. The device produced real electrical current. Such a device is capable of generating approximately 1 volt, and several jars connected together would have produced enough current to electroplate jewelry. Similar vessels were found at nearby Seleucia, and bronze and iron needles were lying beside them. The Roman physician Scribonius Largus, writing in the 1st century of the Common Era, described the treatment of gout by applying an electric ray to the patient's feet. The idea of the therapeutic application of electricity was known to the ancient world long before science gave it a name. The Baghdad Battery predates Volta's official invention by at least 16 centuries. In 2003, it was stolen from the museum during the invasion of Iraq, and its fate to this day is unknown. We have lost what may be the oldest electrical device in the history of humanity, and can no longer conduct even a modern analysis. Now back to Egypt, but this time to an object that fits on a dining table and looks like a component from a machine shop. In that same year of 1936, archaeologist Walter Emery opened the tomb of an official named Sabu in the Saqqara necropolis. Beside the skeleton lay a broken stone disc 61 centimeters in diameter. It was carved from schist, a brittle rock that splinters at the slightest careless blow. 3 curved blades converge on a central hub, and from above the disc is indistinguishable from the impeller of an industrial pump. The age of the tomb is approximately 5,000 years, the first dynasty, the era of stone and copper tools. How thin blades were carved from a rock that crumbles at an accidental touch, without a single chip, no one can explain. An enthusiast printed a copy on a 3-dimensional printer and mounted it in a housing with a shaft. The copy immediately began pumping water powerfully, functioning as a classical centrifugal impeller. Without a housing, the spinning disc created a stable water vortex, of such force that coincidence of form is ruled out. Engineers at Airbus also printed copies and confirmed their aerodynamic properties, though the disc cannot serve as a propeller. Egyptologist Cyril Aldred observed that the form of the disc suggests the reproduction of a metal original of far more ancient origin. If the Sabu disc is indeed a model of a lost mechanism, We have before us a trace of an engineering intelligence that vanished before recorded history began. 5,000 years ago, someone in the Nile Valley knew how to move water with centrifugal force. And then that knowledge dissolved into the sand, along with the name of whoever discovered it. The final find does not hide underground. It stands before thousands of tourists every single day, near the Chinese city of Xi'an. In 1974, farmers digging a well struck fragments of a clay figure. That was the beginning of the discovery of the Terracotta army, more than 8,000 full-size warriors of fired clay. Every figure stands at human height. No two faces are the same, though only 8 basic head molds were used. They guard the tomb of the first emperor of the unified China, Qin Shi Huang, for whose construction 700,000 workers were mobilized. Less than 1% of the entire complex has been excavated to this day. But the sensation was not the statues, it was their weapons. From the pits were raised more than 40,000 bronze arrowheads, swords up to 95 centimeters long, spears and crossbow mechanisms. After 2,200 years underground, the blades gleamed as though forged yesterday, and the edges remained sharp. For 40 years, scientists believed the secret lay in chromium plating. Traces of chromium on the bronze were evident, and chromate conversion coating was only patented in Europe in the 20th century, making the find almost incomprehensible. A joint study by University College London and the Museum of the Terracotta Army in 2019 overturned this theory. The chromium on the swords turned out to be contamination from the lacquer used to coat the wooden handles and bamboo shafts. It had nothing to do with the preservation of the bronze itself. The real secret lay in the high tin bronze composition and the properties of the local soil. The alkaline loess of Xi'an, with its fine particles and low organic content, created ideal conditions for metal preservation. Replica bronzes buried in local soil and subjected to 4 months of extreme testing remained untouched. The same samples buried in British soil were heavily corroded within the same period. The craftsmen of the Qin dynasty 22 centuries ago selected an alloy and an environment that functioned as a perfect preservative. They did not know the words electrochemistry or alkaline corrosion, but the result of their work outlasted every empire that arose after them. 40,000 blades lay in darkness, waiting, like an order that no one had ever rescinded. What surprised you most today? Write in the comments. We have passed through the underground labyrinths of Egypt and descended to the floor of the Mediterranean. We stood before the Iron Pillar in Delhi and looked inside a Roman cup where nanoparticles dance. We held in our hands a battery 2,000 years old and examined a stone turbine 5,000 years old. Every one of these finds is documented and kept in a museum you can buy a ticket for and visit tomorrow. None of them need to be taken on faith. All you need do is go, walk in, and see them with your own eyes. Not one of them requires aliens to explain it. But each requires acknowledging an uncomfortable fact. Our ancestors possessed knowledge that we are rediscovering millennia later. We call these rediscoveries breakthroughs. They probably called it ordinary craft. Progress is not a straight line upward. It is a spiral, where each new turn begins from the same point of unknowing. The real mystery is not how they did it. The real mystery is why we forgot.